The lights in the Nexus Coliseum were bright enough to blind a normal person. Katie Mitchell squinted as she walked through the metal doors that slid open with a soft hiss. The noise hit her like a wall. Thousands of alien voices filled the air, creating sounds she had never heard before. Some were high and musical, others deep and rumbling like distant thunder. Katie's hands shook as she looked around the massive arena. The ceiling stretched so high above her that she could barely see it. Rows and rows of seats filled with strange creatures rose up on all sides. Some aliens had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales that caught the light like mirrors. A few looked almost human, but had too many eyes or fingers that bent the wrong way. She wore the same clothes she had on when they captured her ship 3 days ago. Blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and her old work boots. The aliens around her wore shiny outfits that seemed to change colors as they moved. She felt like a child who had wandered into the wrong place. Dr. Kellen Brooks had tried to prepare her for this moment. He was the only other human in this place, locked up somewhere beneath the arena. Before they took him away, he had whispered to her about what the aliens called this event: the Primitive Species Exhibition. They brought creatures from newly discovered worlds and made them perform like animals in a circus. The floor beneath her feet was smooth and silver. It reflected the lights above, making her feel like she was walking on stars. But Katie knew better. This was not a place of wonder. This was a place where the powerful came to laugh at the weak. A voice filled the arena, speaking in a language that sounded like singing birds. Then her translator device kicked in, and she could understand the words. The voice belonged to a tall, thin alien with purple skin and 4 arms. He stood on a platform high above the crowd. "Welcome, honored guests, to our annual celebration of galactic superiority," the announcer said. His voice was smooth and pleased with itself. "Today we present to you a specimen from the recently discovered Deathworld, known as Earth." The crowd made sounds that Katie's translator told her were laughter and cheers. She felt her face grow hot with anger and embarrassment. "This creature comes from a planet so dangerous that only the most violent species can survive there," the announcer continued. "Yet look how small and weak it appears. The gravity on its world is twice what most civilized species can handle. Yet it has no natural armor, no claws, no venomous fangs." More laughter from the crowd. Katie clenched her fists. She wanted to shout at them, to tell them she was not an animal in their zoo. But she remembered what Dr. Brooks had told her. Stay calm. Watch and learn. Wait for your chance. The humans of Earth have a lifespan of less than 100 years, the announcer went on. They fight wars with primitive weapons and destroy their own environment. They are barely more advanced than the beasts they share their world with. A hologram appeared in the air above Katie's head. It showed images of Earth, cities, forests, oceans. But the aliens had chosen the worst pictures they could find: wars, pollution, natural disasters. They made her home look like a nightmare world where nothing good could grow. Katie's heart ached as she watched. She remembered the ranch where she grew up in Montana, the way the mountains looked in the morning light, the sound of her mother's voice calling her in for dinner. The aliens made it all seem ugly and worthless. Today, this primitive mammal will face 3 challenges, the announcer said. First, a test of reflexes against our champion from Veltar. Second, a problem-solving challenge in our dimensional maze. Third, if it survives, a final test of what humans call courage. The crowd was getting louder now. Katie could see alien faces pressed against the barriers that separated the spectator areas from the arena floor. Some of them were taking pictures with devices that glowed and hummed. Others were making bets on how quickly she would fail. A section of the arena floor opened up, and something emerged that made Katie's breath catch in her throat. The Veltar champion was 7 feet tall and built like a machine designed for killing. It had 4 arms, each ending in hands with fingers that looked like knives. Its skin was dark green and covered in what looked like natural armor plates. Its eyes were solid black and never blinked. The creature moved with impossible speed and grace. It seemed to flow across the arena floor like water, never making a sound. When it stopped in front of Katie, she could see her reflection in its eyes. "The test begins now," the announcer said. "The human must touch the golden sphere before our champion can reach it. The sphere will appear in a random location every few seconds. Let us see how the primitive reflexes compare to Veltar genetic perfection." A golden ball of light appeared 20 feet to Katie's left. She ran toward it, her boots slipping slightly on the smooth floor. But the Veltar was already there, one of its 4 hands touching the sphere before she had covered half the distance. Crowd cheered. The sphere vanished and appeared again, this time to her right. Katie changed direction, pushing herself as hard as she could. Her lungs burned and her legs ached, but she was not going to give up. The alien reached the sphere first again, but this time Katie was closer. For the next 5 minutes, the golden sphere appeared and disappeared around the arena. Katie ran until sweat poured down her face and her shirt stuck to her back. She was faster than the aliens expected, but the Veltar champion was something beyond normal speed. It moved like lightning, like it knew where the sphere would appear before it did. Katie managed to touch the sphere 3 times out of 20, each time. She did. A few aliens in the crowd made sounds of surprise, but mostly they laughed and pointed at her as she stumbled and gasped for breath. When the test ended, Katie stood in the center of the arena with her hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. The Veltar champion had not even broken a sweat. It looked at her with what might have been curiosity, then flowed back to wherever it had come from. "As expected, the primitive human fails the first challenge," the announcer said. "But let us see if it can at least provide entertainment in the puzzle maze." The floor around Katie began to change. Walls rose up from the silver surface, creating a complex 3-dimensional puzzle. Some walls were solid, others were made of energy that buzzed and sparked. The maze stretched up into the air, with platforms and bridges connecting different levels. "The human must reach the center of the maze within 10 minutes, the announcer explained. "But beware, primitive creature. The walls will shift and change. Energy barriers will try to stop you. This maze has defeated champions from a dozen worlds." Katie looked up at the towering puzzle above her. She had always been good at figuring things out. Back home, she could fix any machine on the ranch and solve puzzles that stumped her friends. But this was different. This was designed by minds that thought in ways she could not imagine. The buzzer sounded, and Katie began to climb. The first few levels were not too hard. She found handholds and footholds, pulling herself up like she was climbing the cliffs. Back home, but as she went higher, things got more complicated. Walls moved when she touched them. Energy barriers appeared out of nowhere, forcing her to find new paths. The crowd below her grew quiet as she moved through the maze in ways they had not expected. She did not try to force her way through like other species might. Instead, she studied each section, looking for patterns and weaknesses. Katie was doing better than anyone expected, including herself. But she was still just a human girl from Montana, and this maze was built by aliens who had been designing puzzles for thousands of years. Katie reached the 5th level of the maze and stopped to catch her breath. Her hands were scraped from climbing the rough walls, and her arms ached from pulling herself up level after level. The crowd below seemed smaller now, their voices distant. Like the sound of wind through trees. She studied the path ahead of her. 3 bridges stretched out from the platform where she stood. One bridge glowed blue, another red, and the third was clear like glass. Energy fields crackled around each one, and Katie could see they would hurt if she touched them. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena. "The primitive human has reached the 5th level faster than expected. But now comes the real test. She must choose the correct path, or the energy fields will send her back to the beginning. Katie ignored the voice and focused on the bridges. She had learned something in the first few levels that the aliens did not expect. The maze followed patterns. Everything the aliens built seemed to follow rules, even when those rules were meant to be hidden. Back home in Montana, Katie had spent years helping her father track animals through the wilderness. Her father always said that everything left a trail if you knew how to look for it. Even the cleverest animal followed patterns without knowing it. The blue bridge flickered every 3 seconds. The red bridge stayed steady. The glass bridge seemed to bend light in strange ways, making it hard to look at directly. Katie closed her eyes and listened. There was a sound, very soft, coming from somewhere ahead. It sounded like humming. She opened her eyes and looked more carefully at the glass bridge. The sound was coming from there. The bridge was not just glass. It was some kind of crystal that vibrated at a frequency she could barely hear. That vibration might be the key. Katie stepped onto the glass bridge. The energy fields around it sparked and hissed, but they did not touch her. She had chosen correctly. The crowd below made sounds of surprise as she walked across the crystal bridge to the next platform. Dr. Brooks watched from the holding cells deep beneath the arena. He sat on a metal bench with his hands pressed against the transparent wall that kept him prisoner. Other cells around him held creatures from different worlds, all waiting their turn to be entertainment for the aliens above. Brooks knew Katie better than anyone else in this place. They had worked together for 2 years before their ship was captured. She was not just a farm girl from Montana like the aliens thought. Katie had been a combat medic in the Earth military before she joined the space program. She had seen war and death and had learned to stay calm when everything around her was falling apart. But there was something else the aliens did not know about Katie, something that Brooks hoped would never be necessary. During her military service, Katie had volunteered for an experimental program. The Earth military had developed nanobots, tiny machines, smaller than blood cells that could repair damage to the human body and enhance natural abilities. The nanobots were designed to activate only in extreme danger, when the person's life was truly threatened. They would flood the body with chemicals that made humans faster, stronger, and more alert. They would also repair injuries that would normally be fatal. Katie did not know the nanobots were still in her system. The military had told her they were removed after the program ended. But Brooks had seen her medical records when they selected her for the space mission. The nanobots were still there, dormant, waiting. Brooks hoped they would stay dormant. If they activated, Katie would become something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that might be more dangerous than helpful. Back in the maze, Katie had reached the 8th level. She was getting close to the center, but the challenges were becoming harder. The walls around her were now made of some kind of metal that shifted and changed shape every few seconds. Platforms appeared and disappeared without warning. Energy barriers moved like living things, trying to block her path. The crowd was getting louder again. Some aliens were standing up in their seats, pointing at Katie as she moved through the maze in ways they had not expected. She did not attack the barriers like other species had tried to do. Instead, she watched them, learned their patterns, and found ways around them. "Remarkable," said a voice near the announcer's platform. It belonged to a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. "The human is solving sections of the maze that took our best engineers months to design." The announcer's purple skin had turned a darker shade. He was clearly not happy that Katie was doing so well. "The primitive is simply lucky. It cannot possibly understand the advanced mathematics behind the maze design." But Katie was understanding something. Not the mathematics, but something more basic. The aliens who built this maze thought in straight lines and perfect angles. They created problems with logical solutions that could be calculated and predicted. Humans thought differently. Katie's brain had evolved on a world where logic was not always enough to survive. Sometimes you had to trust instincts, take risks, and find solutions that made no sense to anyone else. She reached a section where the path split into 7 different directions. Each path was marked with symbols that glowed and shifted. The energy barriers here were stronger, crackling with power that made the air itself smell like lightning. Katie stood still for a moment and closed her eyes. She remembered being lost in the mountains near her home when she was 12 years old. The trail had disappeared in the snowstorm, and she could not see more than a few feet in any direction. Her father had taught her that when you could not trust your eyes, you had to trust everything else. She listened to the sounds around her, felt the air moving against her skin, smelled the different scents that came from each path. One path smelled like metal and electricity, another like something sweet and artificial. But one path smelled like nothing at all, which meant it was the most dangerous. Katie chose the path that smelled like nothing. The energy barriers around it were so strong they made her hair stand up, but they did not strike her. She had guessed correctly again. The crowd was much quieter now. Many aliens were leaning forward in their seats, trying to understand how a primitive human was solving their most advanced puzzle. Some were taking notes on glowing devices. Others were speaking in urgent whispers to their companions. Katie climbed higher through the maze, level by level. She was tired and hungry, and her whole body ached from the effort. But she was also getting angry. These aliens had taken her from her home, put her in a cage like an animal, and now they were making her perform tricks for their entertainment. She reached the final section of the maze. The center was just ahead, protected by a complex barrier system that created a spinning wall of energy. The barrier moved in patterns that would have taken a computer several minutes to calculate, but Katie did not try to calculate anything. She watched the barrier for 30 seconds, then stepped forward at exactly the right moment. The energy wall parted around her like water onto stone. She had done it. She had reached the center of the maze in less than 8 minutes, faster than any other creature had ever managed. The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted in sounds that her translator told her were expressions of shock and confusion. Some aliens were arguing with each other. Others were demanding explanations from the officials running the exhibition. Katie stood in the center of the maze, breathing hard but proud of what she had accomplished. She looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at her. For the first time since arriving in this place, she did not feel afraid, but her victory would not last long. The aliens controlling the maze had not expected her to succeed, and their equipment was not designed to handle this situation. Deep in the maze's control systems, circuits that had never been tested began to overload. Katie was looking up at the crowd when she heard the sound behind her. A mechanical whining noise like a machine breaking down. She turned around and saw that the energy barrier that was supposed to shut down when she reached the center was still spinning. But now it was spinning faster, and the energy was changing. From blue to red to white. The barrier was about to explode. Katie tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The maze walls were too high to climb, and the energy barrier filled the entire center section. She had just enough time to realize what was happening before the barrier discharged all its power directly at her. The beam of energy hit Katie like a lightning bolt. It lifted her off her feet and threw her against the far wall of the maze. She hit the metal surface hard and fell to the floor, her body completely still. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. They thought this was part of the show, the inevitable failure of the primitive human. They had enjoyed watching her solve the maze, but now they were seeing what they had come to see, proof that no matter how clever the lesser species might be, they were still inferior. The announcer's voice filled the arena again, sounding pleased and relieved. And so ends another demonstration of galactic superiority. The primitive human managed to provide some entertainment, but in the end, advanced technology proved stronger than animal cunning. But deep beneath the arena, Dr. Brooks was not cheering. He was counting under his breath, his eyes fixed on the screens that showed Katie's motionless form. Katie's body lay perfectly still on the cold metal floor of the maze. The crowd above continued their celebration, making sounds of joy and satisfaction. They had seen what they came to see, another primitive species put in its proper place. Announcer was already preparing to move on to the next part of the show. Guards, please remove the human specimen and prepare the arena for our next exhibition. The delegates from the crystalline worlds have brought us a most interesting creature that they claim can change its shape at will. But something was happening inside Katie's motionless body that no one in the arena could see. The energy blast from the malfunctioning barrier had done more than knock her unconscious. It had sent electrical signals racing through her nervous system, signals that reached parts of her body that had been asleep for years. Deep in her bloodstream, millions of tiny machines smaller than bacteria began to wake up. The nanobots had been waiting in her system since her military days, programmed to activate only when her life was in extreme danger. The massive energy discharge had triggered every safety protocol they possessed. Dr. Brooks continued counting in his cell far below. His eyes never left the screen that showed Katie's body. The other prisoners around him had gone quiet, sensing something important was happening, even if they did not understand what double quotes 14.15. The nanobots flooded Katie's bloodstream like a silver river. They repaired the damage from the energy blast in seconds, rebuilding damaged cells and strengthening her bones and muscles. They released chemicals into her brain that made her thoughts faster and clearer than any human had ever experienced. 16. Katie's eyes snapped open, but they were no longer the warm brown eyes of a farm girl from Montana. They glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The nanobots had not just repaired her body, they had improved it, beyond anything the aliens thought possible. She stood up with fluid grace, moving like water flowing uphill. Every muscle in her body was now perfect, enhanced to levels that human evolution had never achieved. Her senses were so sharp she could hear individual heartbeats in the crowd above, could smell the fear that was just beginning to touch the air. The crowd's celebration died as they saw Katie rise from the floor. Confused murmurs began to spread through the audience. This was not supposed to happen. The energy barrier should have killed her, or at least left her unconscious for hours. Katie looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at her. For the first time since arriving in this place, she was not afraid. The nanobots had removed her capacity for fear, replacing it with something colder and more dangerous, the perfect awareness of a predator. She studied the maze around her with new eyes. The walls that had seemed so challenging before now looked like a simple obstacle course. She could see weaknesses in the metal structure, stress points where the alien engineering was not as perfect as they believed. The security systems in the arena began to activate. Sensors that monitored the maze detected energy levels that should not exist. Automated alarms started sounding, creating a high-pitched wailing that made many aliens cover their ears. Red lights flashed around the arena as the computer systems tried to understand what they were detecting. The readings showed that Katie's body temperature had dropped by several degrees. Her heart rate had slowed to an impossibly steady rhythm, and she was generating an electromagnetic field that interfered with their equipment. "Security breach in the exhibition maze," announced a mechanical voice. "Unknown energy signature detected. Initiating containment protocols." Energy barriers slammed down around the maze, creating a cage of crackling power that should have been impossible to escape. The barriers were designed to hold creatures much stronger and more dangerous than any human should. Katie looked at the barriers for exactly 2.3 seconds. In that brief time, the nanobots in her system analyzed the energy patterns, calculated the harmonic frequencies, and found 17 different ways to disable them. She chose the simplest method. Katie placed her hand against the nearest barrier and began to hum a low, steady note that matched the barrier's natural frequency. The energy field began to vibrate, then shake, then tear itself apart as its own power turned against it. The barrier collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. Then the next one failed, and the next. Katie was not breaking through the alien technology. She was making it destroy itself. The crowd was no longer celebrating. Panic was beginning to spread through the audience as they realized something was very wrong. The primitive human was doing things that their best scientists said were impossible. Katie stepped out of the ruined maze and looked around the arena floor. The smooth silver surface reflected her image back at her, but she barely recognized herself. The nanobots had changed more than just her abilities. Her face was calmer, her movements more controlled. She looked like someone who had never known doubt or hesitation. The arena's defense systems activated next. Weapons platforms rose from hidden panels in the floor, bristling with energy cannons designed to stop the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. They locked onto Katie with targeting beams that painted her with red light. "Stand down immediately," commanded a voice from the arena's control center. "You are in violation of Galactic Council safety protocols. Submit to restraint or face immediate termination." Katie tilted her head slightly, studying the weapons pointed at her. The nanobots were already calculating trajectories, analyzing the energy patterns of the weapons, finding weaknesses in systems that had never failed before. She smiled, but it was not the smile of the young woman who had entered the arena. It was the smile of something that had evolved on a world where everything was designed to kill you, and only the deadliest survived. The weapons fired all at once, filling the air with beams of energy hot enough to melt metal. But Katie was no longer where they were aiming. She moved between the beams like she was dancing, her enhanced reflexes making the alien weapons look slow and clumsy. She reached the first weapon platform and placed her hand on its base. The nanobots in her system interfaced with the alien technology, learning its secrets in seconds. Then she turned the weapon around and used it to destroy the others. The crowd was screaming now, but not with excitement. Real fear was spreading through the audience as they watched their most advanced weapons being turned into toys by a creature they had dismissed as primitive. Katie jumped from the arena floor to the first level of spectator seats in a single leap. That should have been impossible for human muscles. But she was no longer entirely human. The nanobots had rebuilt her body into something new, something that combined human intelligence with capabilities no natural evolution could produce. She landed among a group of aliens who had been laughing at her just minutes before. They scrambled to get away from her, their artificial enhancements and genetic modifications suddenly seeming weak and useless. Katie did not chase them. She did not need to. Her presence alone was enough to clear the entire section as hundreds of aliens fled in panic, pushing and fighting each other to escape. The announcer's voice cracked as he tried to maintain control of the situation. "Security. Teams to the arena immediately. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. This is not a drill." But Katie was already moving to the next section of seats. She vaulted over barriers that were designed to contain creatures much larger than herself. She moved through the panicking crowd like a force of nature, and every alien who saw her understood, on a primal level, that they were in the presence of something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The aliens in the arena had spent their lives believing they were the peak of evolution in the galaxy. They had enhanced themselves with technology, modified their genetics, and created perfect societies where nothing dangerous could touch them. But Katie Mitchell was the product of a different kind of evolution. She came from a world that had tried to kill everything on it for billions of years. A world where only the most adaptable, the most ruthless, and the most clever could survive. The Earth military's nanobots had not changed what she was. They had simply revealed it. They had awakened the part of her that was pure human predator, the part that had climbed to the top of the food chain on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. And now the galaxy was about to learn why. Earth was classified as a death world. Katie reached the second tier of seating, where the most important aliens sat in luxury boxes, protected by force fields and armed guards. The guards raised weapons that could punch holes through battleship armor. She looked at them with eyes that glowed like blue stars and smiled again. The guards hesitated, suddenly unsure of their training and their technology. In that moment of hesitation, Katie moved. The crowd's cheers had become screams, and those screams were about to become something much worse. The guards in the luxury boxes fired their weapons at the same time. Energy beams that could cut through steel filled the air where Katie had been standing. But she was already gone, moving faster than their targeting systems could track. Katie appeared behind the first guard before he could turn around. She did not kill him, but her hand touched his neck in a way that made him fall unconscious instantly. The nanobots had given her perfect knowledge of alien anatomy, showing her exactly where to apply pressure to shut down their nervous systems. The second guard spun around, his weapon charging with a high whine. Katie grabbed his wrist and twisted gently. The alien's arm bent in a direction it was not meant to go, and he dropped his weapon with a cry of pain. She caught the weapon before it hit the ground and crushed it in her bare hand like it was made of paper. The third guard was smarter. He activated an emergency beacon that should have brought dozens of reinforcements. But Katie had already identified the communication frequencies the aliens used. She generated an electromagnetic pulse with her body that scrambled every electronic device within 50 feet. The luxury boxes filled with alien dignitaries who had been enjoying the show from their comfortable seats. Now they pressed themselves against the walls, trying to stay as far away from Katie as possible. These were some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, creatures who commanded starfleets and ruled entire worlds. But faced with a human who had been pushed too far, they cowered like children. Katie looked around the luxury box with her glowing blue eyes. She saw creatures made of living crystal, beings that looked like walking plants, and aliens with too many limbs and not enough sense. All of them were staring at her with expressions of terror and disbelief. "You enjoyed watching me perform," Katie said, her voice calm and steady. "You thought I was an animal in your zoo. Now let me show you what animals from my world can really do." She moved through the luxury box like a dancer, but every movement served a purpose. She disabled security cameras with touches that looked gentle but shorted out their circuits. She turned off force fields by humming notes that made their generators shake apart. She made the alien technology fail simply by understanding it better than the aliens who built it. The emergency alarms were screaming now, filling the arena with sound and flashing lights. But Katie found the noise soothing. It reminded her of the storms back home in Montana, when thunder would roll across the mountains and lightning would split the sky. She jumped from the luxury box to the next level of seating, landing among a group of alien scientists who had been taking notes on her performance. Their research equipment was scattered across tables, glowing screens filled with data they thought would help them understand primitive species. Katie picked up one of their devices and looked at it. The nanobots in her system interfaced with the alien technology, downloading their research in seconds. She learned that the aliens had been studying humans for months, ever since they captured her ship. They had detailed files on human weaknesses, human fears, human limitations, but they had missed the most important thing about humans. They had never understood that humans were not just another species that had learned to use tools. Humans were weapons that evolution had shaped on a world where being weak meant being dead. Katie crushed the research device and moved on. Behind her, the alien scientists huddled together, their confidence in their own superiority shattered like glass. Arena's emergency response teams were finally arriving. Katie could hear their vehicles approaching from outside, and she could see armed figures rappelling down from the ceiling. But she was not worried. The nanobots had analyzed every weapon and piece of equipment in the facility. She knew exactly what the aliens would try, and she knew exactly how to stop them. The first response team burst through the doors to the seating area, wearing armor that could stop bullets and carrying weapons that fired concentrated plasma. They moved in perfect formation, their training evident in every step. Katie watched them approach and felt something like pity. These soldiers had trained their whole lives to fight civilized enemies who followed rules and used predictable tactics. They had never faced something that had evolved to kill or be killed. She waited until they were close enough to see her clearly. Then she moved. The first soldier fired his weapon where Katie had been standing. The plasma bolt hit the wall behind her, melting a hole 3 feet wide. But Katie was already beside him, her hand touching his helmet in a way that overloaded his suit's systems. The soldier fell to the ground, unconscious but alive. The second soldier tried to back away while firing rapidly. Katie moved between his shots like she was walking through rain, never hurrying, never seeming to effort. She reached him and tapped his chest plate. The armor cracked down the middle, and the soldier inside passed out from shock. The third soldier was different. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands, understanding that fighting Katie was like trying to fight a hurricane. She nodded at him and moved past, leaving him unharmed but shaking. The rest of the response team lasted exactly 16 seconds. Katie moved through them like wind through wheat, leaving unconscious soldiers in her wake. She did not kill any of them, but she made it clear that she could have if she chose to. The crowd in the upper levels of the arena was trying to evacuate, but panic made them slow and clumsy. Aliens who had enhanced their bodies with technology found that their modifications made them awkward when they were scared. Creatures who had never felt real fear in their entire lives discovered that terror made them stupid. Katie climbed higher into the arena, moving from level to level like she was climbing a mountain back home. But this mountain was made of alien flesh and alien pride, and she was tearing it down piece by piece. She reached a section where the wealthiest aliens sat, creatures who owned entire star systems and controlled the fate of billions. They had built their power on the belief that they were superior to all other life in the galaxy. Now they scrambled over each other to escape from a single human girl. Katie did not chase them. She did not need to. Her presence alone was enough to shatter their confidence and send them running. She stood in the center of their expensive seating area and watched them flee like startled birds. The nanobots in her system were monitoring everything around her, tracking heart rates and stress levels and fear chemicals. The data showed that she was having exactly the effect she wanted. The aliens were learning that strength was not about technology or genetic modification. It was about surviving on a world that tried to kill you every single day. More security forces arrived, but they made the same mistake as the first team. They tried to fight Katie like she was just another alien with advanced technology. They did not understand that she was something much more dangerous, a human who had been pushed beyond her limits. Katie disabled their weapons by singing to them. The sound waves she produced interfered with their targeting systems and made their energy cells unstable. When the aliens tried to call for backup, she jammed their communications by generating radio frequencies with her body. The arena's command center was in chaos. Alien commanders shouted orders at screens that showed their forces being defeated by a single opponent. Their computer systems could not calculate how Katie was doing what she was doing, because they had never encountered anything like her before. In the holding cells below, Dr. Brooks watched the screens with a mixture of pride and worry. He was proud of Katie for showing the aliens that humans were not to be underestimated. But he was also worried about what would happen when the nanobots eventually shut down. Katie would need to be far away from this place when that happened. Katie reached the top level of the arena, where the most important aliens in the galaxy had been sitting in their golden seats. The area was empty now, except for scattered belongings and the lingering smell of alien fear. She stood at the highest point of the arena and looked down at the chaos below. Thousands of aliens were streaming toward the exits, pushing and fighting each other to escape. Security forces were scattered across the arena floor, their weapons useless against an opponent they could not understand. Katie had accomplished something that no other being in galactic history had ever done. She had single-handedly cleared the Nexus Coliseum, sending the most powerful creatures in the galaxy running in terror, but the 16 seconds that would define her legend were just beginning. Katie stood alone at the top of the empty arena, breathing slowly and steadily. The nanobots in her system were beginning to calm down, their combat protocols shutting off one by one. The blue glow in her eyes was fading, returning them to their normal brown color. Below her, the Nexus Coliseum looked like a battlefield. Broken security equipment was scattered across the arena floor. Emergency lights flashed red against the walls. The smell of fear and burned electronics filled the air. Katie walked down from the upper levels, her movements becoming more human with each step. The nanobots were returning to their dormant state, leaving her feeling tired and sore. But she was still alive, still free, and the aliens who had treated her like an animal were nowhere to be seen. She reached the center of the arena and sat down on the silver floor where she had started this journey. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Her hands were scraped from climbing through the maze, but she was smiling. For the first time in days, she felt like herself again. The arena's main doors opened, and alien emergency workers began to enter carefully. They wore heavy protective gear and carried medical equipment, but they moved like they expected Katie to attack them at any moment. Katie raised her hands to show she was not holding any weapons. "I am not going to hurt you," she called out. "I just want to go home." The emergency workers stopped and talked to each other in worried voices. They had seen the security footage of what Katie had done. They knew she could tear through their equipment like paper if she wanted to. But they also had orders to provide medical care to anyone who needed it. Dr. Brooks emerged from one of the elevators that led up from the holding cells. 2 alien guards walked beside him, but they looked nervous and ready to run. Brooks hurried across the arena floor toward Katie, relief clear on his face. "Katie," he said as he reached her. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" Katie stood up and hugged her friend. "I am fine, Kellen. Tired, but fine. What happens now?" Before Brooks could answer, more aliens entered the arena. These were not soldiers or emergency workers. They wore expensive robes and moved with the careful dignity of important officials. Katie recognized some of them from the crowd that had been watching her perform. The leader of the group was a tall alien with silver skin and too many eyes. He approached Katie slowly, his hands visible and empty. When he spoke, his voice was careful and respectful. "I am Ambassador Zethka of the Galactic Council," he said. "I have come to apologize for what happened here today. The treatment you received was ... inappropriate." Katie looked at the ambassador with eyes that were brown again but still held a hint of something dangerous. "Inappropriate? You captured my ship, put me in a cage, and made me perform tricks for your entertainment. You tried to humiliate me in front of thousands of people." The ambassador's skin changed color slightly, becoming paler. "Yes, that was wrong. We ... We did not understand what humans truly are. We made assumptions based on incomplete data. What we are," Katie said quietly, "is survivors. We come from a world that spent billions of years trying to kill everything on it. We learned to adapt, to fight back, to never give up. You thought that made us weak because we do not have scales or claws or poison. But you were wrong. More alien officials were arriving now, filling the arena with worried voices and urgent conversations. Katie could see them pointing at the damaged security equipment and talking rapidly to each other. Some of them were taking pictures and making recordings. Brooke stepped closer to Katie and spoke quietly. "They are scared, Katie. Word of what happened here is already spreading across their communication networks. Every species in the galaxy is going to hear about this." Katie nodded. That was good. She wanted them to know that humans were not toys to be played with. Ambassador Zethka cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Mitchell, we would like to offer you and Dr. Brooks safe passage back to your home world. We will also provide compensation for the misunderstanding that occurred." "Compensation?" Katie asked. "What kind of compensation?" "Full diplomatic status for humanity," the ambassador said quickly. "Trade agreements, technology sharing, a seat on the Galactic Council. Everything we offer to advanced civilizations." Katie was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she smiled, but it was not a threatening smile this time. It was the smile of someone who had just won a very important game. "And the primitive species exhibition?" she asked. The ambassador's skin turned even paler. "It will be permanently canceled. We are also reviewing all our first contact protocols to ensure this kind of mistake never happens again." Katie looked around the arena one more time. The alien officials were watching her carefully, waiting to see what she would do next. The emergency workers had finished collecting their damaged equipment. The place where thousands of aliens had laughed at her was now quiet and empty. "I accept your apology," Katie said finally. "But I want something else too." "Anything," the ambassador said quickly. "I want every species you have ever put in this arena to receive the same diplomatic status you are offering humanity. No more exhibitions. No more treating people like animals because they come from worlds you consider primitive." The ambassador looked uncomfortable, but he nodded. "It will be done." 3 hours later, Katie and Dr. Brooks were aboard an alien transport ship heading back toward Earth. The ship was luxurious, with comfortable rooms and excellent food. The alien crew treated them like honored guests instead of prisoners. Katie stood at a window looking out at the stars. Earth was still days away, but she could feel herself getting closer to home with every passing hour. Brooks joined her at the window, carrying 2 cups of coffee that the aliens had somehow managed to provide. "How are you feeling?" Brooks asked. As he handed her a cup, Katie sipped the coffee and made a face. It tasted like coffee, but something was not quite right about it. "Better. The nanobots are completely dormant now. I feel like myself again. Are you sorry about what happened?" "About what you had to do?" Katie thought about the question for a long time. She remembered the fear in the aliens' eyes as they ran from her. She remembered the sound of their security equipment breaking under her hands. She remembered standing alone in an arena while thousands of creatures cheered for her failure. "No," she said finally. "I am not sorry. They needed to learn that lesson. The whole galaxy needed to learn it." Brooks nodded. "The communication networks are calling it the most significant event in galactic history. Some aliens are demanding investigations. Others are asking for protection from humans. A few species are requesting permission to visit Earth." Katie laughed. "They want to visit Earth? After what they just saw?" "I think some of them are curious about what kind of world produces people like you," Brooks said. "Others probably want to make sure there are not too many more like you." The transport ship continued through space toward Earth, carrying the first human ambassadors to a galaxy that had suddenly developed a great deal of respect for the species from the dangerous little planet. When they finally reached Earth, Katie and Brooks were met by officials from every major government. News reporters asked them hundreds of questions about their time in space and their contact with alien civilizations, but Katie was not interested in being famous. After a few interviews, she asked to go home to Montana. She wanted to see her family, sleep in her own bed, and help her father fix fences on the ranch. A month later, Katie was back on the ranch, wearing her old work clothes and helping her younger brother Jake repair a broken gate. The alien transport ships that occasionally visited Earth seemed like something from a dream, was asking her questions about space and aliens while they worked. Katie answered him patiently, but she kept the details simple. There was no need to scare him with stories about nanobots and arena fights. "Do you think the aliens will cause trouble for Earth?" Jake asked as they tightened the gate hinges. Katie looked up at the sky, where the first alien embassy was being built in orbit. Around Earth, ships from dozens of species came and went, bringing diplomats and traders and curious scientists. "No," she said, "I do not think they will cause trouble. They learned something important about humans. They learned that we do not start fights, but we always finish them." That night, Katie lay in her bed looking out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was still talking about the 16 seconds when a human girl had taught them the difference between civilization and survival. Katie closed her eyes and went to sleep, knowing that humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. The aliens would never again make the mistake of thinking humans were weak just because they looked harmless. And sometimes, late at night when she was alone, Katie's eyes would glow with a faint blue light, and she would remember what it felt like to be the most dangerous thing in a room full of predators. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity, and that respect would last for generations to come.